I'm going for kind of a Conan O'Brien thing these days. Yes, but less funny. 1, 2, 3, 4. Do 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 da da da. Do 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 do. Ba da ba 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 ba. It's Wednesday. I went to the comic book store. Picks of the week. I just threw the picks of the week all over the floor. Why do I have you here? All right. Hi. My name is Jimmy, and I went to the comic book store today. So not a whole lot. I looked at. I was just looking at the stack of stuff I bought, which was a decent stack, and I was like, oh, I've talked about every single one of these titles, and there's really nothing else to add, so I don't have a whole lot, but I've got plenty from last week to talk about, so if you would just shut up. All right. First up is the first 2 issues of Devil's Highway from AWA. Number 2 came out today. Number 1, obviously, is from a month ago. This is another AWA, which stands for All Writers and Artists, or whatever it is. And it's written by Benjamin Percy, who's also writing Year Zero for the same publisher, and also for writing Wolverine for... find out who writes, or what publisher Wolverine is with. So I don't know what this is about. It looks very pulpy. So you can see this is a truck stop parking lot with a lady's shoe in it. I'm sold. I don't need to know anything else. This looks like a very Southern Noir-y type story, and I'm looking forward to it, as I am to all Southern Noir stories. Another thing I got this week was this trade paperback here. This is Scream: Curse of Carnage, 1 through 6. And this is part of the recent Venom Carnage storylines. I guess it's its own. I don't think it's going more than 6 issues. All right, I should explain, I guess. So, I don't read many Spider-Man titles currently. And any ones that I do read is only on the Marvel Unlimited app, so I'm always at least 6 months behind. So, I think a lot of this story is from about a year ago. So, and Donny Cates took over Venom, which I really like. I just, I didn't have room for it every week. I shouldn't even buy as many as I do now. So they just gave Venom to Donny Cates, and they're like, honey, you can just go nuts with it, because you've been killing it for us so far, because he created the Cosmic Ghost Rider, and he wrote that really good Thanos series, wherein the Cosmic Ghost Rider is from. He's writing Thor. He's becoming a bigger shot over there. He's becoming another Jason Aaron over there, closer by the day. So they pretty much handed him, it seems to me anyway, they've handed him Venom and Carnage, who are now almost entirely nothing to do with Peter Parker at this point. They're barely Spider-Man characters. I mean, that Venom movie from last year, was not related to Spider-Man at all. I'm just waiting for the point to get here. It should be here in a minute. I'm sorry. I should have waited before I started. My point is, Warren, the owner down the shop, was confused as to why I asked him for this months ago, by the way, way before it came out, which was dumb. As a former comic shop employee, I should know better. You quit leaving your diastolic around, or whatever the hell that's called. This is all to say, the reason I bought this book that I wouldn't normally read is because it was drawn by Chris Mooneyham. And Chris Mooneyham is one of the finest comic book artists working today. I don't see him doing much of anything anymore, though. Anyways, it's really a bummer. First thing I knew him from was a book called Five Ghosts, which was on Image. And it was written, I want to say, I can't remember who wrote it now, because it was the first time I'd read anything by either of them, and I was blown away by both. Look into who wrote Five Ghosts. That's a real question for my fake intern over there. And he'll pop up, like, I think he drew one of the stories in that Our Soldiers at War 100, or whatever the War Stories DC 100-page John I bought recently. I think he drew the Unknown Soldier series, or the Unknown Soldier story that Christopher Priest wrote. It doesn't matter. Chris Mooneyham is this is my little elevator pitch. Chris Mooneyham's art looks like if Klaus Janson and Frank Miller really did have a baby together. And so that's romantic, isn't it? All right, good. Off to a hell of a start. Picks of the week. And I took last week off for my birthday. Picks of last week. That's right. I had a birthing day. Well over voting age now. So I took the week off of work, which was not smart because I I didn't figure my PTO hours very well, so now I'm working a whole lot this week before the pay period's over. What are you going to do? It was well worth it, to be honest with you, because I got a hell of a lot of reading in. All right, so first what we had last week, we'll start with this. We had Bad Mother #1, written by Krista Faust and drawn by Mike Deodato Jr., and it was very, very good, as I imagined it would be. Krista is, I just kind of forgotten about this, but Krista is an avowed non-mother. I think she had her tube side when she was only like 30, and she's vocally like opposed to breeding. I don't think she has a problem with other people doing it, but she's far from the first woman I've known to just be like, I'm not gonna be cranking babies out for anybody, please. Which is fine. I love kids. The one I have, look up what his name is. He's great. He seems like a nice kid, but I totally get when people don't want him either, because they're monsters. That's got nothing to do with anything. So the reason I even brought it up, though, is because this is a story about a woman whose daughter gets into some deep poop. I don't want to give away too much. So Krista says in the back matter, she's kind of talking about how this was a fun story for her to write because she's not going to know what that's like. But, it's the whole point of fiction, isn't it? All right. Well done, Jimmy. I haven't even had a second cup of coffee today. And then also last week, I got this free comical book called This Is What Democracy Looks Like. And it was headed up by James Sturm, who is a cartoonist of some regard. And this was really good. I don't know how many of you watching give a poop or have children, but it was a very clear, objective look at how the government actually works, which I know already, but I can always use a refresher, especially in these crazy times in which we live, because sometimes it seems like it's completely legal to shoot a guy in the face. This actually says that that's not true, so make that phone call again. All right. Holy poop. I said poop like 3 times. I read a lot of hardcovers this week, or a lot of square bounds, as we used to call them. First up, this is not hardcover. Crisis on Infinite Earths, which I bought, I don't remember, a few months back. I think I bought this back when there was no new comic books coming out at all, because I was catching up on all my DC stuff. Crisis on Infinite Earths, for those of you who are not in the know, was a 1-year-long series, 12-issue series in 1985 that effectively restarted the DC universe. It was the first time they had done anything like that, to my knowledge. There had been stories in the 60s and 70s called Crisis on Multiple Earths, because, alternate universes and multiple dimensions, that's always been a comical book thing. But this was like, it's the mid-80s, and all of DC's main characters are like 50 years old, and they're getting real stale. And they're having trouble really, Marvel doesn't seem to have as much trouble with this, but DC's always seems to have trouble updating things. It's like they always have to have Clark Kent land in Kansas in 1938 or 39. Marvel, they just kind of, and it's fluid and it changes or whatever. Anyway, this was also the year after Marvel did Secret Wars, which was the first major superhero crossover story. And so this is one of those rare moments where DC eclipses Marvel at Marvel's own game. Secret Wars, briefly, it was a really fun story, and it's the story where Spider-Man got his black costume, and it's been a cornerstone of the Marvel universe for, ever since 1984. But it was expressly created to sell action figures, which is there's nothing wrong with that, but it just kind of cheapens it. I don't know how else to say it. I know it's silly because these are all just toy commercials, all of these comics. But Crisis was actually, I guess because it was more thorough. Like Secret Wars had like the heavy hitters from the Marvel Universe, Spider-Man and most of the X-Men, and their villains as well were in Secret Wars because they were all in that toy line. Crisis is complete. The only character, and I'm not as familiar with DC characters, I don't remember Booster Gold showing up in this book at all, which is a shame because I like Booster. Blue Beetle's all over it. Anyway, so the whole story, and this is actually, Marvel pretty much stole this concept just about 6 years ago for the second, they did another crossover called Secret Wars in 2014, and it was the same exact thing, which is I do not like to admit, because not only do I like Marvel more than I like DC, but Jonathan Hickman wrote Secret Wars, which is one of my favorites. But it's the same essential story, is that all of these universes are combining and they're getting destroyed. I guess it's not the exact same. No, it's pretty much the same. There's like an antimatter wave in Crisis. There's an antimatter wave just wiping out anything in its path. And so you see all the different universes that DC has created over the years get destroyed, and then some of them will survive and band together and they fight the Monitor and the Anti-Monitor. It's a whole thing. It's Marv Wolfman and George Perez, and it's for sure their magnum opus. It's, you know, most people associate, well, I guess maybe more with some people might associate that creative team more with their run on the Teen Titans, but I don't really care about the Teen Titans. But like I say, I'm trying to say anyway, this was so much fun. I really had a lot of fun reading this. I mean, sometimes it's just because I don't know who most of these characters are, but every single character DC Comics has created is in this, and it's a lot of fun. And then as a nice little follow-up to that, I had these to read. Crisis on Infinite Earths, 100-page giant. This is 1 and 2. I don't think they're doing any more. So if you've watched, you know, any of these within the last few weeks, I'm absolutely cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs over these DC 100-page giants they've been putting out for the last year. About a year now. The thing, and I don't think I've mentioned this before, this is just a minor caveat. The first two stories in all of these, the first two stories are the only ones that are new. All the rest of the stories are reprints, which is following how it was in the 70s with when they first started doing these 100-page giants. Only problem is that the reprints, like the reprints in the other books, I usually have not read because they're DC. I don't read that much. This, though, the reprints are just from this. So it's like I read this and then I got to read about 20 pages of each of these. But they were still fun. And the new stories, it's a lot of fun to see a new take. And the new ones are written by Marv Wolfman, for that matter. And it's good. Marv Wolfman has not lost a trick. I lost a step. He used to be a Marvel guy. I still think of him as a Marvel guy. Speaking of which, I also read this. The DC Universe of Len Wein, speaking of Marv Wolfman. This I bought the first week of quarantine. I only finally got to it, but woo! Not as fun, though. So here's the thing. It was fun, don't get me wrong. Len Wein and Marv Wolfman are also pretty much always discussed in the same breath. Or at least in fandom they are. I don't know if anybody really does that anymore. But in the 60s, when they broke into the industry, as most guys back in the 60s, like the second generation of comic book writers and artists were, or for Marvel anyway, were all just nerds. They were like fans that they made their own fan magazines, and they all kind of started becoming a group together through the mail and stuff. And they all moved to New York and just like, hey, we'll do anything. And Stan Lee was like, all right, take out the garbage and then write Daredevil. So Len Marv, as they were known, were always a team. So they came to Marvel first and worked for them, went to DC. I think they might have come back, because if I'm not mistaken, did Wolfman write Gene Colan's Dracula? I think he did. Frank, if you're watching this, tell me how close I am to being right. But they both ended up at Marvel, or at DC mostly. Len Wein, though, is a co-creator of Wolverine, which is one of my favorites. It is my favorite superhero. He's also the co-creator of the Human Target, which I'd forgotten all about. So there's a few Human Target stories in here. I love the Human Target. These original stories are a little cornball. I'm a much bigger fan of the Peter Milligan run on Vertigo in the early to mid-aughts. But still, super fun. And then, there's Spectre stories. The only thing is with these older Silver and Bronze, especially the earliest stories. The earliest stories were like Teen Titans stories. And as I might have mentioned, Teen Titans. I don't even like the New Mutants. I like the X-Men, but I never thought of them as teenagers. Or I never thought of them as younger than me, because they were always older than me. I always, as a kid, even as a teenager myself, I always felt the sidekicks were always there to, how to put this? Superhero sidekicks were introduced so that boys, especially, would have a character that they could relate to, they could put themselves into. As a boy, or a former boy, I just had a birthday, so I'm no longer a boy. I was like, I don't want to relate to a sidekick. I want to put myself into the hero's, perspective, POV. And I don't know if that's just me, or because the sidekick trend is obviously not what it used to be. And the Teen Titans is just a team of sidekicks. Huh? All right. Good. I'm glad I got that squared away. Oh, man. This one right here, you guys. I read this week. Jack Kirby, The Epic Life of the King of Comics by Tom Scioli. See his name there? This is brand spanking new, and I could not resist, even though it's a little... Very good, though, and I'm not complaining about the price point at all. Tom Scioli, if you're not familiar, the only thing I'm really familiar with him, by him, is Godland, which he drew with Joe Casey, which was, like, upfront, just a book trying to do Jack Kirby stories. It was essentially just Joe Casey and Tom Scioli's version of the Fourth World stories, basically. Or like a mishmash of them all. Because the main guy is kind of like a Mr. Miracle, but that is part of the Fourth World. And it's great. I love it. It's just full on. It's like going to see a cover band almost, but it's better because it is original. So who better to do a comic book bio of Jack King Kirby than Tom Scioli? And I mean, and I've read, well, I still have that big Kirby book that Mark Evanier wrote that I still haven't read, but I've read a lot about Kirby, and there is still stuff in here that I did not know. Damn, there was one thing in particular, now I can't remember what it was. Something that I didn't know. I think it was towards the end. It's really good. Scioli tells the story from Jack's perspective. So it's told in first person. What was it, Phantom Force? It was a lot of stuff that talked about Jack's career when he was still alive, and he was on, that's what it was. I don't know if that's what it was, but one thing that I learned that I must have known but forgotten about was Jack Kirby made an appearance on the CBS sitcom Bob, which starred Bob Newhart in the early 90s. It was his third primetime sitcom, but did not last, and he played a cartoonist, and Jack Kirby played himself in an episode. And I absolutely watched every episode of that show because I loved Bob Newhart, and I love comics, and I love sitcoms. It's like a no-brainer. And of course it got canceled immediately. And then finally, oh good, another 20-minute episode. I read this, A Walk Through Hell, the complete series by, I like when it's a hardcover, I like to knock on it. Garth Ennis and Goran Sudzuka. I hope I'm definitely not pronouncing his name right. Goran Sudzuka, I believe he's Czechoslovakian. This was Daddy-O. I read this in the middle of a very, very warm, he's from Croatia. I read this in the middle of a very warm summer afternoon, and I had chills. It's a very scary book. I thought it was scary. I had bought the first, I want to say 5 or 6 issues as single issues when they were coming out, and then I lost track of it when I switched shops. So I saw they had this hardcover out, and I was just like, you know what, just give me the whole thing. Because I don't even think I have all of those single issues here, so I couldn't even read the whole thing. You know what I'm saying. But very classic Ennis. It's a cop story, but that's just where it starts to go into a horror thing. In fact, now that I'm thinking about it, I think every horror story that Garth Ennis has wrote, a cop has been the center, like the protagonist. Which kind of makes sense, because Ennis sees cops as being these very rational, but, it's always like a detective like that. Certainly in this book. It's just great. And Suzuka and he have worked together on a couple things, although, frankly, I don't remember what now. Oh, right, Suzuka drew Outlaw Nation, which I have and haven't read yet. He drew Ghosted, which was really good, by Josh Williamson. Oh, yeah. Oh, no. Okay, so this is the first... Sorry. We're learning together. This is the first time they have worked together, which is weird, because his style is very conducive to Ennis's storytelling. Thumbnail sketch. There's a warehouse in Long Beach that these 2 FBI agents go into and never come out, so 2 more go in. Our main protagonists go in to find them, and they find themselves essentially in hell. And it's... whew! Bracing, to say the very least. It's terrifying and is really, really good. I can't recommend it enough. Oh, I also can't recommend Shutting Up enough. Picks up last week. All right, that's it, everybody. Good Lord. It's going to be over 20 minutes now. I'm going to buy you a fake stopwatch so you can start timing me. Let's see. I don't think I have anything else to promote. No, that's it. All right. I think that's it for now. I hope to get some more reading in, because aside from those two trades, or the trade and the two single issues I showed you, I've got a lot of other stuff that I want to read, that I want to talk to you guys about. Oh, all right. And that's the end of this. Goodbye.